Big LEZ'S League, an all rugby league experience.
Hello, welcome back to Big LEZ'S League, an all rugby league experience. I'm your host, Big Les. We're going to be going through the spots up for grabs in the Queensland Maroons side. And I think compared to New South Wales, when we did New South Wales, there was a lot less up for grabs, a lot of spots already locked in going into next year, you'd think. But in this side, I don't necessarily think there's too many spots that aren't up for grabs. I think there's a lot of spots that are up for the taking, obviously passing on the shields to some of the younger guys as well. And definitely a lot of interesting discussion points based off World Cup form and form generally in the 2024 season. Obviously, you haven't seen a ball kicked yet in 2025, and that's going to be a big determinant of what these sides look like. But I thought it'd be interesting just to take a little bit of a look as to what spots at the moment are currently up for grabs in these Origin sides. So we're going to be going through Queensland. We've already gone through New South Wales. If you want to go and have a look at that one, that podcast, it is already out. Make sure to subscribe to the YouTube, become part of the Big LEZ'S League community. Let's get straight into it. Fullback, we have got Ponga, Walsh, and AJ Brimson. Those are the top three fullbacks to be picked for Queensland, in my opinion. As far as depth goes, there's a few other guys that could land that fullback spot due to injury and stuff like that. If you want an in-depth depth sheet, you can go onto the TikTok or the Instagram, scroll down a little bit, you'll find it there somewhere in the post if you want to get a real grasp of the depth in each position. And that goes really deep into, obviously, guys that play other positions that could go there and play there as well. But this is just really basic. The top picks, the guys that are the most obvious, the ones that stand out the most for each position. Ponga, Walsh, AJ. To be honest, this could go to either Ponga or Walsh, depending on how they go in 2025. I honestly think the fullback jersey for Queensland, it is completely up for grabs. I could not tell you with a straight face who is going to get that jersey going into game one of next year. I think it's really going to depend on the form of both of these guys going into 2025. Ponga, Walsh, gun to head, I think it's going to be Walsh, just based off last year. And, obviously didn't have the most amazing series. He still played very, very well and still always wanted the ball in his hands, which is such a good sign. I know that Billy Slater is going to be a big fan of that as well. I do think Walsh is the front runner, but as I said, I think it's really up to form as to who gets that jersey, Walsh or Ponga. AJ is probably going to come in if there's an injury to both of these guys in that sort of scenario. But I think it will be really between Ponga and Walsh as to who gets that Queensland jersey going into game one of State of Origin next year. And that's going to be really sold on form. Let's go into the wing jersey. We have got Xavier Coates, Murray Taulagi, Dane Gagai, Valentine Holmes, and Selwyn Cobbo. Those guys are the most likely to grab those jerseys. As I said, if you want a more in-depth depth sheet, make sure to go over to the Instagram. You get all of the guys that can slot onto the wing there for Queensland. But these guys are the front runners. For me, the front runners would be Coates and Taulagi. I think that both of those guys would be the front runners for that jersey. You could slot Hammer on the wing there as well, but I think that at left center, he just absolutely kills it. So he's probably the only guy at the moment that we've gone through that's locked in. But look, honestly, I think it's going to be really dependent on form as to who gets those wing spots. There's a few other guys that could sort of creep their way in as well. If you go to that depth sheet, you'll know who I'm talking about. But these are the front runners, and I think Coates and Taulagi are the most likely to get that jersey. But yeah, look, it will be very interesting to see if there are a few smokies in there. Cobbo is always a smoky as well. Does he slot onto that left wing next to Hammer? Then that'd be a really, really scary combination. It also depends on where Selwyn Cobbo is going to be playing too going into next year. Is he going to be in the centres? Is he going to be on the wing? That's going to be really interesting as well. So Coates and Taulagi probably the front runners for that jersey, but Cobbo obviously in the discussion as well for a wing spot depending on his form next season. Let's go into the centre spots. Cobbo, Holmes, and Hammer are the front runners there for the centres for Queensland. I think that Holmes and Hammer will be those guys. Holmes, though, I'm very 50-50 on. I think that Cobbo could take his jersey if he does have a big season there in the centres for the Brisbane Broncos. But yeah, Hammer for me is probably the only guy that we've talked about at the moment that's locked in. I think that he'll be locked in onto the left center spot. As to the other guys, and they'll be really fighting for spots in the back line there. The back five, other than Hammer, is really up for grabs, and it will be interesting to see if there's some stars that pop up. I know that Xavier Savage, for example, if he has a big season, he'll definitely be thought about. Alafiana Khan Pereira, if you want to bleed in that new next stage, he might be a guy going into his third season now, I believe. Alafiana Khan Pereira, second or third season now. He'll be looking to grab a jersey as well. But Hammer and Holmes at the moment. Cobbo obviously there as well in the discussion. But I think it'll be Holmes and Cobbo fighting it out for a jersey in the centres there. Hammer, for me, locked in. 5'8", Dearden, Munster, Mam. That's in no particular order. Those are just the front runners for the Queensland number 6. Dearden, Munster, Mam. This jersey is up for grabs as well. I think that what we've seen from Dearden in the rep stage, obviously Dearden playing for Queensland, he was outstanding and one of the standout players in that Queensland side, despite obviously going down in the last 2 games. He was easily Queensland's best player during that series, or at least the latter part of that series when a lot of things didn't go the way of Queensland. He was definitely the standout defensively, made some huge plays. And again, a real smoky for the Golden Boot going into, obviously, that discussion as well and who ends up getting that. He was the player of the match, I believe, in that third game for the Pacific Championships, and rightly so. Had a really, really nice World Cup. Really nice World Cup there. Tommy Dearden, obviously, a big part into the win as well against Tonga. I think as well, if Munster does have a few injuries going into next year as well and struggles to come back, which I don't think is going to happen, but Dearden could realistically take that jersey. And to be honest, if Dearden is in better form than Munster, and this is really controversial because we know how good Munster is on the rep stage, but if Dearden comes out in better form than Munster, then we really are having a discussion of, does Dearden take Munster's jersey in the number 6 for Queensland? Do we see Munster drop out? It's going to be a really interesting discussion. Again, do you want to bleed and blood guys for the future? Dearden, as I said, was one of the better guys in that series this year past for Queensland in a losing series for Queensland. Dearden was one of the better players in that team. So, Dearden, maybe he does take Munster's jersey. You never know. I'm not guaranteeing or locking anything in yet because we obviously haven't seen any footy in 2025. But going off what we've seen in this season past, I honestly think it's a possibility that Dearden, if he does come out in better form than Cam Munster, which, obviously 2 different sides, Munster in a really strong Melbourne side looking to go back and play in a second grand final and obviously try and get one win over the Penrith Panthers or whoever is in that grand final. I think Melbourne are pretty much going to be fighting for a grand final spot. So he's in a grand final side there, Munster, going up against Dearden, who obviously is in a side that can push for the top 8, maybe even the top 4 as well. It's going to be a real dogfight for that number 6 jersey for Queensland, and Billy Slater has a real tough choice on his hands. Ezra Mam, I think he only really comes in due to injury. I think he'll definitely be close to be getting in the squad. But in regards to getting into the side, I think that it is going to be a lot harder for him to get in over guys like Dearden and like Munster who have already had those reps in the Origin arena and in obviously the Australian arena as well. Halfback DCE and Sam Walker. Controversially, I think this jersey is also up for grabs. And it really depends on how Daly Cherry Evans plays and what he does as well. We don't even know if he is going to make himself eligible for Origin, if he is going to have one last dance in the Origin arena as the number 7 there, or if he will pass on the mantle to a guy like Sam Walker. But I think it does, sort of determine, a big determinant of this is going to be form as well. I think that, again, if Sam Walker comes out and has a blitz of a start coming back from that ACL injury, which is going to be tough because he is going to miss a big chunk of the start of the season. But if he does come back, he comes back really well and sort of starts to get into the thick of things. I think that Sam Walker could take that jersey. I really, really do. And again, if you want to build towards the future, it depends on what Billy Slater wants to do with this Queensland side. I think that we could definitely see Sam Walker take that jersey. And maybe it's more likely going into 2026 when you got a fully healthy Sam Walker that's not coming back from a ACL. It isn't going to be out for the start of the season. Maybe it's more likely then, but I still think it is likely if he does come out in 2025 post this ACL rupture and obviously comes back and kills it. I think that he could definitely take that jersey or be a little bit of a smoky to take that jersey there off DCE. DCE is probably the front runner, and obviously is the front runner, the incumbent of that number 7 jersey, and probably won't give it up until he retires. But you just never know with rugby league. Sam Walker, I think, is right behind him, and after the season he had this season past, and the back end of that season, leading into the 2025, where he could come back from this ACL injury with a point to prove, I think that he will definitely be a discussion point for this Origin side, Sammy Walker. Let's move into the hooker jersey. Harry Grant, Ben Hunt, Smokey Reid-Marnie. I think it's a similar deal here to this halfback jersey. Harry Grant, Ben Hunt, they're the front runners. You've obviously got Reid-Marnie there, who's a little bit of a smoky in that hooker jersey. I think that we could see Hunt drop out of the Origin side. I really do. He dropped out of Australia. They went away from that hooker 1-2 punch there. Do they take a little bit of a similar leap in the Origin arena? I don't think that we'll be seeing Billy Slater go with a 2 utility approach like he did in games 1 and 3. I think he will be going for just the 1 utility there. Whether that's Ben Hunt, whether that's Reid-Marnie, whether it's someone else, I'm not too sure. But yeah, look, I wouldn't be surprised if maybe they do go for an all-forward bench with the strength that they have in the forward pack, which we're about to talk about. The number of guys you've got here is absolutely insane for Queensland, and all of them are a shot depending on form. But in terms of the hooker jersey, Harry Grant for me is locked in. It really depends on if Ben Hunt keeps that jersey. If we do see it get passed on to a Reid-Marnie, who is really aggressive and I think would be an absolute animal in the Origin arena. And it really does depend on Reid-Marnie and the form of the Bulldogs as well as if he does get into this Queensland side. But Harry Grant, for me, he's locked in. Ben Hunt, Reid-Marnie. Ben Hunt's obviously the favourite to get that second hooker spot. But I do think it will be a bit of a dogfight there between Hunt and Reid-Marnie for the number 14 jersey, or maybe even the number 9 jersey with Grant in that 14 role. Let's move on to the front row forwards. This is where things get a little bit interesting. I think that this jersey is up for grabs. I think that the amount of forwards here, it really depends on who's in the best form. Let's go through the front rowers. Reuben Cotter, Lindsay Collins, Tino Fa'asuamaleaui, Paddy Carrigan, Mo Fotuaika, Felice Kafusi, Tom Flegler, Jai Arrow, Tom Gilbert. Those are the favourites there for the front row spots for Queensland. Obviously a bunch of young guys other than Felice Kafusi, just really trying to stamp their spots in this side. I think Carrigan's locked into 13, or at least into the pack. Carrigan's locked in. Cotter's probably locked in. Tino returning, depending on how he returns. I think that he's going to be there or thereabouts. Collins, I think it depends on form. I could honestly see it go either way. After the back end of his Pacific Championships, I think that he'll have a strong year going into next year, especially with that Roosters side without Jared. It does depend on form for me, though, still, as controversial as that might be. Mo Fotuaika the same. Felice Kafusi probably drops out with Jai Arrow coming back. Flegler, Gilbert, depends on how they return from injuries. But yeah, look, certainly a lot of these spots in the pack are up for grabs, and that's only talking about the front row jersey. Out of these, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 front rowers, only 4 are realistically going to be in this side. 3 to 4 of them are going to be in the 17, depending on how you want to build your 17 as well. Look, it'll be really interesting to see what happens. Gyro is definitely going to be close. Cotter and Carrigan for me are locked in. Everyone else, it's going to depend on form. And that's saying a lot, obviously, with the amount of stars in this pack depth. But yeah, look, I think that a lot of these guys are really going to have to push to get into this team. I think Billy Slater is going to be ruthless as well. Moving into the second row forwards, I've got Dave Fafita, Jaden Sewer, Jeremiah Nanai, Kurt Catewell, Reuben Cotter, Trent Loiero, and Helam Lukey. That's Dave Fafita, Jaden Sewer, Jeremiah Nanai, Kurt Capewell, Ruben Cotter, Trent Loiero, and Helam Lukey. Plenty of depth there in the back rowers as well, and that's just the favourites. For me, after last year, what did they miss? They missed Dave Fafita in the left edge back row there. You'd have to think he's back in contention, whether it be starting or off the bench. Dave Fafita's in this side for me. Jaden Sewer had a really strong series. I think he came out of the side in the later games, but he had a real strong series while he was in there. That game one, I thought was one of his best Origin performances. Obviously, been in the Origin arena before in that worst side ever, but I thought that his Origin return was really solid in that first game. Nanai, defensively, that's going to be a real headache as well. I think that it really does depend on how he comes into 2025 defensively. He's got to have a really, really strong year. But yeah, look, that one's for me is 50-50. Kurt Capewell, I don't think we see him back in an Origin jersey. Look, he played well in that third game for sure. But I just think that he is a little bit of a liability defensively. I don't think they pick him in the centers again either. But yeah, look, I'm 50-50 on Kurt Capewell. I don't think we see him back with the amount of depth they've got in the forwards, but especially here in the back row. Cotter for me is going to be either front row or back row, depending on how they want to structure that front row pack. Trent Loiero is close. Obviously, was the 18th man for Game 3. That just shows how highly regarded he is to Billy Slater. I think that he'll be close, or at least in the squad. Helam Lukey is going to be close as well, depending on the season he has in 2025. He'll be a real smoky. But for me, if I'm picking my back rowers right now for Queensland, it's probably Ruben Cotter on the right with Fafita on the left. And then if I'm putting my front row together, it's probably Tino and Collins starting in the front row, Carrigan at 13, and then my bench would be, depending on if all of these guys are in form, the two front rowers I'd be carrying on my bench would probably be Gilbert and Flegler, to be honest. And that's obviously if they're in form and if they come back from these injuries well. Arrow's going to be close. Felice Kafusi, highly regarded to Billy Slater, played with Billy Slater. Plays well in that front row role. Real hard hitter in defense. Mo Fortawake is going to be close as well. It will be really interesting to see how they build that rotation. Lock forwards, Carrigan, Cotter, Liero, Hopgood, and Kurt Mann. I think Kurt Mann was a real smoky to get into the side in 2024. I had him in all three of my teams. I was really shocked that he didn't get in. Obviously, due to injury and suspension, I think it was that he missed out. But he was someone that I would have had in my side as well in that 17 jersey that Billy Slater loved over at Kurt Capewell. And obviously with Kurt Capewell in the footy that he was playing, I would have had Kurt Mann in there over him at that stage of the year. But yeah, look, Kurt Mann I think is going to be close. I'd have him as a smoky for 2025 if he has a pretty similar year. Hopgood's going to be close to being in that 17. Wouldn't shock me if he is in that 17. Carrigan's going to be close. Carrigan's going to be close. Carrigan's locked into this jersey, the lock forward jersey. Cotter, obviously, as I said, he'll be in my back row. Liero is going to be close. Carrigan's the lock forward in this side. Either that or a front rower, depending on how you want to build this side. As I said, you could have obviously Cotter in the 13 with him in the front row. It really depends on how you want to build this 17. But Carrigan's locked in. Cotter's locked in. Tino for me would be locked in depending on how he goes this season, as I said. But a lot of these spots in the forward pack are up for grabs. Let's move on to the 14 jersey. I've included the 14 jersey here, obviously, as well. Ben Hunt, Callum Ponga, Kurt Mann. Those are the favourites for the 14 jersey for me. Tom Dearden you can chuck in there as well, but I'm pretty confident that Dearden might be a real shot at getting the number 6 over Cam Munster. If not, Dearden's here as well. If Dearden doesn't get the 6, Dearden's going to get the 14 for me. He's definitely in this 17 somewhere. So if he doesn't get the 6, he's probably the 14. I don't have him here on the list because I've got him in the 6s. I've been really specific. But if Dearden doesn't get the 6, as I said, he'll be the 14. Otherwise, you've got Hunt, Ponga, and Kurt Mann. I honestly think Kurt Mann could fit into the rotation of the forward pack, so you don't necessarily need him as a 14. Ben Hunt, depends on how much longer he wants to play Origin for or how long he will be playing Origin for and if they want to go in a new direction. Callum Ponga, I didn't like him coming off the bench. I think it could be a hooker, so maybe a Reed Marnie could grab that jersey as well. Really depends on how you build your side. I can't lock anyone in for the 14 jersey. I think it's completely up for grabs. I think it could be someone really unexpected too going into next year. Very keen to see what Billy Slater picks there. But there you go. That is your Queensland spots up for grabs. Let me know what smokies you have to get into the Queensland side in 2025, or whose position do you think is up for grabs in this team? For me, I think that both of the half spots, 5'8" and halfback, are up for grabs. I think the wing spot is up for grabs. I think fullback, depending on form, is up for grabs. Centers, other than Hammer's spot on the left, I think the right center spot's up for grabs. Hooker is pretty much locked in for Harry Grant, but the 14 jersey, that's up for grabs. Front row spots, most of them are up for grabs, particularly the bench spots. Second row, I think second row's up for grabs. I think lock forward's locked in for Paddy Carrigan or Ruben Cotter, depending on how you want to build this team up. But most of these spots, 9 out of 10 of the spots, are pretty much up for grabs. So let me know who you think is a smoky to make the Queensland side going into next year. Subscribe and become a part of the Big LEZ'S League community. We'll see you guys in the next one.